Our scripture this morning is taken from the book of Genesis, the 42nd chapter, verses 6 through 25, following on with Joseph's story from last week. Now Joseph was the governor of the land. It was he who sold to all the people of the land. And Joseph's brothers came and bowed themselves before him with their faces to the ground. When Joseph saw his brothers, he recognized them, but he treated them like strangers, and he spoke harshly to them. "Where do you come from?" he said. They said, "From the land of Canaan, to buy food." Although Joseph had recognized his brothers, they did not recognize him. Joseph also remembered the dreams that he had dreamed about them. He said to them, "You are spies. You have come to see the nakedness of the land." And they said to him, "No, my lord, no. Your servants have come to buy food. We are all sons of one man. We are honest men. Your servants have never been spies." But he said to them, "No, you have come to see the nakedness of the land." They said, "We are your servants, our 12 brothers, the sons of a certain man in the land of Canaan. The youngest, however, is now with our father, and one is no more." Joseph said to them, "It is just as I have said to you, you are spies. Here is how you shall be tested. As Pharaoh lives, you shall not leave this place unless your youngest brother comes here. If one of you go, bring your brother, while the rest of you remain in prison, in order that your words may be tested, whether there is truth in you, or else, as Pharaoh lives, surely you are spies." And he put them all together in prison for 3 days. On the 3rd day, Joseph said to them, "Do this and you will live, for I fear God. If you are honest men, let one of your brothers stay here where you are in prison. The rest of you shall go and carry grain for the famine of your households. And bring your youngest brother to me. Thus all your words will be verified, and you shall not die." And they agreed to do so. They said to one another, "Alas, we are paying the penalty for what we did to our brother. We saw his anguish when he pleaded with us, but we would not listen. That is why this anguish has come upon us." Then Reuben answered them, "Did I not tell you not to wrong the boy? But you wouldn't listen. So now they come to reckon him for his blood." They did not know that Joseph understood them, since he spoke with them through an interpreter. He turned away from them and wept. Then he returned and he spoke to them. And he picked out Simeon, and he had him bound before their eyes. Joseph then gave orders to fill their bags with grain, to return every man's money to his sack, and to give them provisions for their journey. This was done for them. This is the word of the Lord.
Isla mentioned that we are picking up the Joseph story that we had last week and the week before. Just a reminder for those who are not familiar with this story's context, Joseph was a favorite but youngest brother, sold by his older brothers, mostly because he was an overzealous, obnoxious braggart who tattletaled on them at every turn. Joseph was bragging and showing off, but they silenced him, they thought. Joseph ends up being trafficked to Egypt, where he serves in a prestigious house. He does very well until the lady of the house makes advances on him, and in rejecting her, Joseph finds himself thrown in prison in the face of false accusations. Joseph is made a peer leader in prison. The guards are happy to have Joseph do all the work, until Pharaoh, the Egyptian equivalent of a king or dictator, had bad dreams. Joseph, coming from a family that had interpreted dreams for many generations, comes to the forefront of the story. He comes and he is put in charge of a massive farming and rationing project, combating the famine that Joseph predicted. through Pharaoh's dreams. All of Egypt has plenty of food, even in the midst of this famine. And here comes Joseph's brothers, because this famine is affecting the surrounding lands as well. The brothers who sold him now coming to him for aid. Full circle. Coincidence? Karma? Holy Spirit? Name it what you will. The brothers have bowed down at Joseph's feet, just like those annoying dreams he had as a child suggested they would. But they don't recognize Joseph. They only see the Egyptian governor before them. But Joseph recognizes them. Of course he does. And that's where our story picks up today. Now, surely that was all a long time ago, right? Many years have passed. So much has changed in the lives of Joseph and his brothers before this happened. So surely everything's forgotten, right? All's forgiven. Yeah. Could you forget the siblings that sold you? I mean, I know most of us haven't experienced that, but could you forgive those who've hurt you that easily? My kids still bring up minor slights from car rides 10 years ago, especially if they're tired or if one of them wants something from the other. Of course, these siblings still remembered what happened. Of course, Joseph still remembered. Of course, they hadn't forgotten. Joseph is here in this palace, as fancy as it might be, but away from his parents, away from everything that was normal to him when he was young, because of these brothers. He's looking at the people who ended the life as he knew it, shipped him away as if he was produce, and now come looking for something to eat. Of course, we know from our story and the way it's told that the brothers remember too. They don't recognize Joseph, but they remember Joseph. Reuben even suggests that the events unfolding are their punishment for selling Joseph. It seems their actions have never really left the brothers. I want to invite you into a moment of reflection, your own version of Joseph's experience. The person or people in your life who've hurt you the most. For some of this will come quickly. For others, we won't want to name it because it's hard and it hurts. If that's the case, it's an invitation, not a demand. You can always think of somebody else historically who's been a hurtful person. But I invite you to imagine the person or people who've hurt you the most right in front of you. And they don't realize you're there. You can speak their language. You can hear them. You can understand them. If they don't seem to think you can hear or understand them, they speak freely about the past. What might they say? They start talking about you. What might they say? What do you imagine they say? What do you imagine they feel? This type of reflection can tell us a lot about the wounds that we carry, our own hurts. It can reveal how much healing we have done. It can also guide us to the work we still have to do. It can be easy in moments like this to create a caricature of other people. We make assumptions on what they're feeling and thinking very quickly. The mean girl, the racist guy, the bully, the hateful family, the Karen, the Trumper, the cop, the Christian. Ouch. It's easy to make characters out of other people, but when we do, when we speak for others, when we characterize them based on our assumptions, when we assume for others, we end up dehumanizing them. We end up dehumanizing them, and we end up dehumanizing ourselves. Because eventually we find groups that we are in on that list of people that we have assumed about, that others have assumed about. We discover that we have been in a cycle of dehumanizing each other rather than letting each other speak for themselves. And all of our hurts, all of our conflicts are really more complicated than we would imagine. All of our healing, all of our growth, we know it was harder than we wished it could be, right? Every time we've gotten over something in our lives, it was harder than we wanted it to be. But in hindsight, more valuable than we could have imagined. All of our hurts are more complicated than we would like. And all of the healing harder than we would like. But we know there is still much more to be done in our society, in our families, and in our own hearts. It would be so much easier if we could just label the people good and bad. Done. It would be so much easier if we just hang a bell around the neck of those who would hurt us, right? Oh, here they come. I hear the cowbell. Watch out, everybody. Guard your hearts. It would be so much easier if we could stop caring before our hearts were broken. But we can't. That's not how life or love works. That's not how community works. And luckily for us, that's not how God works. Can you imagine if God just gave up on us? If God said, these people are just going to hurt me again, I'll stop caring. Why, that would lead to some system of judgment, condemning people on a list of do's and don'ts with no grace, labeling people on just a couple of things we know about them, trapping people in pits of isolation, self-hate, self-destruction, based on one little thing. Can you imagine a religious system that just picked one or two basic sins and judged people as good or bad based on it, and condemned them to hell forever based on it? Yeah, we can. We've often been the one condemned. We've heard that message, and somehow it's been shared into the world around us as the gospel of Jesus Christ, despite every affirmation from God and Jesus to our beauty, to God's grace, to our lovability, to the forgiveness that is there. Somehow we have taken this way of judging and assuming about each other, this dehumanization of each other, and imagined that God does that to us, the one who created us, whose very life and breath are within us. It's an ugly idea. It's been self-destructive to Christianity. It has been self-destructive to the faith we affirmed and to God's people around the world. Instead of judging and labeling, we need to seek grace and mercy. Grace and mercy need to be communities we listen to. Voices, they need to speak like characters in our brain. If we want to characterize someone, let's not make it people. Let's make it love, grace, and mercy, and peace. And imagine what they might say to us. Instead of judging and labeling, we need to seek grace and mercy. Instead of cutting others off or isolating them, we need to seek forgiveness and reconciliation. It's much harder than wagging our finger. It's much harder than wagging our finger or randomly prioritizing sins or judging others based on the little bit we know. What we're talking about doing here, church, is really, really hard. It is the hardest work. It's the work that makes us look at ourselves with complete honesty. A fearless moral inventory, as our friends in recovery call it. It's the work that invites us to look at those who have caused us harm deeper. It doesn't mean we have to take down boundaries to keep us safe. It doesn't mean we enable an abuser. What it does is invite us to remember that hurt people will hurt people. That no one is born wanting to wound those they love. Siblings don't wake up one day and say, today seems like a good day to sell our brother. It's always more complicated. Parents don't choose to say hateful things. Lovers don't forget their desire to be faithful. Leaders don't go looking for war. But in our quest to protect ourselves, and our desire to have that cowbell around those that might hurt us before it happens, that desire to protect our hearts from bad things, in our search for security and safety, we label threats, we distance ourselves, we judge, we oversimplify, and we dehumanize. Not because we want to, but out of fear, or out of a sense of safety. But nowhere in the gospel, nowhere in the Old Testament does God say you will be safe because you followed God. Quite the contrary. To be a person of faith is to put ourselves at risk, trusting that God is always with us and we can handle it. It's an invitation always to do the hard work. Now, in our story today, we see some really good and some really bad advice on this reconciliation thing. Joseph's brothers, we're going to flip the narrative a little bit here, actually do some really healthy things. They talk about their responsibility out loud. They take accountability. Well, we probably deserve to have some bad stuff happen to us. We did some bad things. There's probably consequences. Okay. As the story continues, we even see them protect the younger brother from Joseph. They put themselves at risk. They are willing to self-sacrifice for a sibling. Joseph, on the other hand, does some fairly unhealthy things in our story. For one, he creates a test for his brothers by threatening the youngest. Just to be clear, creating tests of others usually will only confirm what we have already assumed. If you assume that someone is cheating on you and you set up a test, it will probably lead you to assume it's worse. If you assume that someone is stealing from you and you set up a test, you are begging them to hurt you. We tend to set up ourselves and others for failure while claiming that we are neutral. Yet it's our assumptions that are building the test. So we're not. It's much better to risk relationship. To risk relationship and see the change for ourselves. Joseph also yanks his brothers around emotionally. A lot. Maybe we could justify it by saying they deserve it, or he's just testing them. But we know this leads to a dark place. This often justified hurting others. It's really called revenge. And we know that's bad, right? So how do we find the healthy steps to healing? We can see a lot of good examples in Joseph's story. Over his life, Joseph does a lot of humble self-discovery. He does a lot of hard work. He learns new things. He faces the tasks in front of him. He doesn't assume that the challenge before him is beneath him, and he doesn't assume the suffering around him limits him or condemns him. He recognizes it's all a part of life, and he tries to hold on to God in the midst of it. And so Joseph spends a lot of time in prayer, seeking guidance from God. Those are some really good steps to reconciliation from our story. We also see some of the things that experts in trauma resilience still talk about today. Physically releasing our tensions. Some call this exercise. So when we get out and work in the field, we get out and do things, we move our bodies. And amazingly, all that trauma energy that's in us, all the angst from watching the news, all the hurt from things that have happened, all of the struggle our bodies have had can go out. If you watch dogs or pets shake and get it all out, they're not just getting water off, that's how they get stress out. Physically letting out that energy that's in us so that we are not paper bags trying to hold on to a tornado of emotions. And those emotions are another thing that has to get out. We have to name them. We have to name them and share them as they are. If we have to put up a little page of emojis on our refrigerator every day and just point to the one that feels right, whatever it takes for us to start naming our emotions honestly, not just relabeling them as fine, the blanket for all emotions these days. We have to name the emotions that are within us. Joseph has to turn aside to have tears. He lets them out, physically turns to cry so his brothers don't see it. He lets out the feelings that are there. The brothers, in talking to Joseph, are letting out their shame, their guilt, their sadness, their remorse. These feelings are all being shared in our story today. These aren't new discoveries in self-care. We see them throughout history and even in nature. We have to let things out physically. We have to emotionally be honest and share. And then the next step's hard work. The next step is seeking to understand others. It's seeking to understand what motivates them and guides them. We have to look honestly at points of conflict and harm. There is an external and an internal part of this. We look at harms as they happen. And we have to ask first, what role did I play? Now, this is different than self-blame, where I just beat myself up regardless, where I don't think about it at all. I just blame me. Me. It's all my fault. Some of you may find yourself in that tendency. You may identify with that a lot. Something bad happened. Why did I do this? What caused it? That's not healthy. An honest self-reflection says, what could I have done that would have changed the outcome? What could I have done different? Once we've named the role that we played in it, then we can move on. Instead of just sorting this out yourself, though, if you can't get through it and you think, gosh, no, it's just all my fault, phone a friend. Get an appointment with a counselor. Pray. Talk to someone at church. Figure out the internal work first. Then we do the external. What role did others play? Not just maybe me and the one who hurt me, but what about other people around? What did they do? Who set this in motion? What role did others play? And this person who hurt me, why are they acting that way? Why are they acting that way? What hurt, what need are they trying to protect themselves from? What issue are they trying to work through? What are they dealing with? This is difficult. Now, we're not making excuses for others. That's different. But we're seeking understanding. We're trying to understand, why did the bully pick on me? Why did the person cheat me, lie to me? Why did that car run into mine? Why did that person not listen when I clearly said what I meant? Why does my family treat me like they do? The things I cannot control. Why does society see me one way and I can't break free? We have to ask, what role do we play? And then what role do others play? It's a protective step to avoid dehumanization. When I can imagine what somebody else might be thinking, it's harder to dehumanize them. I start to put myself in their footsteps, and once I have, I can imagine their life in a different way, and it transforms my experience with them. It might just move me from hate to pity, but pity's a lot healthier than hate. It might even move me from pity to compassion, and compassion brings hope for healing. It's a process that protects us from dehumanizing one another, helps us understand others, and guard our own souls. This process of self-reflection and understanding in others can be life-changing. It can give us the courage to risk, to do some simple experiments in forgiveness. Now let's be clear, reconciliation requires two people or a community to find healing together. Forgiveness only takes one. Forgiveness is the work we do so that reconciliation might be possible. Forgiveness is us doing our self-reflection, understanding another as well, and choosing to no longer let that hurt dictate our future. No longer allowing that pain to define us. It is moving beyond it. It is healing from it, even if the rest of the world stays the same. Taking small risks in relationship. It doesn't fix a broken relationship, but it can heal our heart. As a church, not just here in Covina, but globally, we have lots of this work to do. Where have we caused harm historically as church? And you start rattling in your head, not just gay rights, not just racism, but the Inquisitions, the Crusades, colonization. We've got a lot of work to do as a church, global, right? Where do we still cause harms? Where do we see others still hurting? What risks do we take, big and small, to invite healing? And it's true also in our families, our schools, and our nation. Where have we caused harm? Where are others still hurting? And what risks might we take for healing? It comes down to really hard work in a simple formula. Where have we caused harm? Honestly. Where are others hurting? Honestly. And where might our risk move the dial? Where might forgiveness transform your life? Think back to that imagination experiment at the beginning of the sermon. The people you have been most hurt by are in front of you. Where might forgiveness transform your life? Where do you still seek healing? Where are you seeking healing? And what small, courageous risk might be your first step? Amen.
Amen.